we should probably talk about the first thing in our show notes today, which is the Activision-Blizzard Walkout.
Yep.
And the whole situation. Now, if you watch our news channel, you will know a decent amount of this. We will keep it relatively brief for today. In the Irvine campus, decided, you know what? Fuck the lot of you. Fuck you, management. We are walking out. They did a 4-hour walkout, I believe, on Wednesday. And they had a list of demands, which was things like, basically, equality, equal practices when it comes to, the promotion opportunity, stuff like that. One of the big ones, though, this is one I really want to bring up, is the end to the mandatory arbitration clauses in their employment contracts. Now, to get through all the nerdy legal shit, basically, right, you got an issue, you can go to court, do the whole big legal shebang. That's going to cost a lot of money, a lot of time, and it's going to suck for the company because if they have done something genuinely, there's some bad shit going down, if you're in a court case and that gets to the discovery phase of the case, well, that's when the prosecution legally gets to get their mitts on your files, and those can be public, and that can look very bad for a company. So, a lot of obvious, I think, demands, some of which obviously will not be met. I really find it hard to believe that Activision Blizzard would actually change that for the mandatory arbitration clauses. Hopefully they do, right? Because that stuff is clearly just trying to, side-skirt the government, side-skirt things, So hopefully that ends, but it probably won't. As for the actual thing, I mean, Wowhead have got, a whole bunch of photos, too, of staff, up there on the picket line at the big Blizzard gates. It is what you'd expect, People are certainly standing up for what they think. Now, what makes this all way harder is, of course, the Cosby situation, because we had that. From input to input.
Yeah, go ahead. You've just broken the veil. No one had any idea what I was doing until just now.
There we go. Man was in special business.
This is the problem. This is the power of having multiple camera angles. I can just do stuff and people won't notice. So that black screen was once again. Okay, it's not actually the capture card's fault this time. It's actually my fault for not doing what we're supposed to do with the capture card, which is make sure it works. But it's fine. We now have show notes for people. So to get back to what you're saying,
yes,
the Cosby.
Yes, the Cosby Suite. Basically, you got a bunch of guys here. Pretty rough look, especially in a modern context, and everyone knows about Bill Cosby. Now, your TLDR on the Cosby side of it is basically he said, she said sort of thing as to whether people actually knew about Bill Cosby at this time, probably November 2013. Josh here, where is he? Where are you, Josh? There, Josh Muschiera of Bonfire Studios, who, of course, was a Blizzard staff at the time. In a Medium post, he said that this Cosby room was basically like a sort of ongoing like networking and party with Blizzard developers, some press, even some fans. And, of course, when you throw the fans into that mix, it gets a bit more, ripe for exploitation for certain people, such as this rather inappropriate bastard, Alex Afrasabi. Now, Greg Street also characterized the Cosby Suite as not, all of these people going to the room named after the rapist. He said that it was like, the Cosby thing was like a reference to, this flea market portrait and there being some stuff there in that room, I think like a carpet or something that like resembled an ugly sweater, right? And so we've got Greg saying that it was a green room, which means, loads of people would be going through there. We've got Josh saying that, up to 100 people could have been there. And then a lot of people think, well, okay, how do we look at this? Because a lot of people's initial thought was that basically this was the shag pad of Afrasabi and his mates. But then if you find out there's way more people going there, including, say, like Olivia Grace, who, used to work for Blizzard, then Twitch, then Instagram. You might have seen her in WoW Insider and WoWhead. She was invited to the Cosby Suite party as well by Greg Street. And, she had a Twitter thread about that where, initially it seemed like, well, a lot of, basically the thing there is Alex Afrasabi made a move on her. Don't know exactly what it is. I believe it was getting handsy. But, she had believed for like 8 years that Greg Street had just sort of, it was innocent from his side of things. So it's sort of tricky to know, to know there. It's a sort of thing, if there is just that sort of big ongoing BlizzCon party, you can totally see, and like we've seen this. I mean, like think about the ages of the people here, right? I mean, I wasn't really the party type at university. I've probably been to like 2 or 3 house parties, probably only ever one house party of like, those big giga house parties. And it's just that sort of thing where like, that's an environment where if there was someone around who has got a reputation, people kind of know what that person's going to try to do. And generally speaking, there'll be efforts made to ensure that people aren't in a vulnerable sort of situation there. At least that seems to be how it's sort of generally dealt with on a sort of societal level. Now, there can be arguments to be made about, okay, if somebody's gets some alcohol in them and then starts making those moves, shouldn't be at that party. And I would agree. Now, where this whole thing gets a lot more fucky, a lot worse, certainly from the old PR and optics perspective, is this bit. It's the BlizzCon Cosby crew. This is, as you can see, a chat thread, and I don't know if that's WhatsApp or something, but we've got Dave Kosak saying that he's gathering hot chicks for the cause. Alex Afrasabi is immediately just like, bring him. Dave Kosak's joking back to Alex saying, you can't marry all of them. And that's because Alex has got a reputation of basically getting really drunk, snogging people, loudly proclaiming he's going to be marrying them, and, inappropriate behavior as well, right? Like, touching, groping, etc. So, Dave, this form of banter from Dave is kind of certainly knowing. I mean, the most charitable I think you can say there is he just sort of thinks, Alex, he's a smooth talker. He's a slick dude. He's always, he's always chatting up the ladies, but whatever, it's all consensual or something. That's like the most charitable read you can make. Perhaps a more reasonable and certainly less charitable feeling take of that is that it's just like, yeah, people know what Alex gets up to, and it's a point of humor. Now, I should say this all came out via Ethan Gatch's article for Kotaku. Ethan did note that one of his sources said that when there was a case of workplace predation going on, that Dave Kosak was actually very helpful or, supportive of the staff who was the victim in that case. So sort of thing, this is obviously very bad look for Dave. But in the Kotaku article, however, one source told Kotaku that Kosak was one of the few people who intervened in the past when another Blizzard developer was sexually harassing them. So it's that sort of thing. Is there a difference between people using their position like Alex did here, and then within the workplace predation? But then, if this stuff was to involve Blizzard staff, and it's happening at Blizzard's convention in a suite that Blizzard, the company, has purchased for those staff, well, then you're kind of back to that situation where it's essentially workplace stuff. And then if it's on with fans, that's, in a way, in this case, even worse, because that's all happening in Blizzardy spaces that Blizzard's kind of paying for, right? So to sort of continue on the whole thing with Alex's rep, Jesse McCree, namesake, by the way, of Jesse McCree, the Overwatch hero, really says, creative. Yeah, you misspelled fuck. So there's going back, he's bantering in with Dave's joke about Alex. Alex is saying, I can marry them all, a Middle Eastern. Of course, that's, Alex's heritage that he's, making reference to. And yes, there are perhaps some different cultural practices going on in different parts of the world. And if you go way, way, way back into the past and you look at some of the stories of, kings with their harems and, dozens and dozens of wives and all of those situations, it seems like that's what Alex is kind of mentioning. Now, in case you're wondering how Ghostcrawler, Greg Street, comes into this, basically he's in this group chat. Corey asks if Greg is on the way. Greg says he's at the Hilton bar, which would make sense because from what we understand, this hotel room is on the 5th floor of the Hilton, which is the Hilton at the Anaheim Convention Center. So that's essentially that. Now, Corey Stockton does, in a way that is reflective, because this Facebook comment was made after the fact, to say possibly the greatest group chat in the history of mankind, which doesn't make any sense to me in isolation of this. I think that's a statement that probably makes sense when you compare this text thread with whatever happened, so that you can look back at what happened and this and say, oh, that was the greatest thing for mankind, right? So this is obviously all, it's all looking pretty damn rough. Of course, here's, people were digging into people's timelines. We got Greg Street here. There's people posing with it. Now, here's the thing, right? I've never stayed in a big fancy hotel suite. So I look at this and I think, oh, is this like a part of the hotel lobby? And, it's just an ongoing joke that we have this big Bill Cosby flea market portrait thing. Not really that sure. But Greg then says, there must always be a Cosby Suite taking over from Kozak, absurd proclamations. Now, it's the sort of thing, if people knew, okay, think about this from Ghostcrawler's perspective, right? Let's just say, because at this stage in 2013, he is a notable World of Warcraft developer. Very notable. He's pretty much the one that people know. I mean, you got your Matsons and stuff, but for actual, day-to-day dev team, it's Ghostcrawler that people know. So he's in that position with his Twitter account. Is he really going to tweet this if he knows that Cosby is, all of the allegations and stuff with Cosby, right? So that's the thing. And this is something we got into where there are opinions across everywhere. And I'm pissed off. I forgot I was going to do a poll last night to try to target more of the Americans. Yeah. So over here in the UK, maybe he is, Cosby is more akin to a Jimmy Savile type character where, there had been rumblings of improper behavior for a while, but it took it exploding into the public consciousness. Now, the thing is, from what I understand, if you were watching just the regular daily news and reading the newspapers in 2004, 5, and 6, you will have at the very least seen court things going on with Cosby in, sort of in this area. It seems to me like a lot of people kind of caught those whisperings, but because of Cosby was in their childhood and stuff, they kind of just buried it under. Needless to say, the people involved in this who have actually made public statements, which is Greg Street and Josh, they have both said that they did not know about the Cosby stuff at the time. So it's we either take them at their word, or we assume that actually they did know about Cosby, they proudly tweeted about it, and Ghostcrawler, while being a publicly facing World of Warcraft developer, tweeted about basically the party named after a rapist that they all did. Which, that does seem a little odd. Now, I imagine, especially if Josh is to be believed, and there were many, many, many people going through this party, I think it could make sense that some people there probably knew there were rumblings of Cosby.
Yeah, I mean...
Maybe other people didn't. Sort of hard to know.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I wouldn't mind, kind of comparing some of this stuff to. And there's the stuff about, Michael Jackson's probably a good example, where as to whether any wrongdoing was done in his case, I don't know if there's any court proceedings on that, but everyone's kind of a little bit on the fence, and people are happy enough to joke about Michael Jackson, largely. Are they usually highly appropriate jokes? No. People were joking about Jimmy Savile before all the allegations came out because there was a vibe that seemed off.
Oh yeah, comedians would flat out do that, with Hannibal.
Yeah, so it's a case of I feel like there's this, by being a powerful cultural figure, you kind of make yourself, I don't want to say immune to small allegations like that, but it's almost like the weighting of what you've heard. Yeah. Where in 2005, if you hear even just vaguely that there was some allegation against him, but it's years later, it was never appeared again, it never went to court, never got put away for it, then, if something goes to court, then it's not a guaranteed thing.
Yeah.
So there's no the switch in people's head culturally, I don't think turned until there was a conviction. For a lot of people, especially people who saw him when they were young, watching them as a strong cultural figure. It's like the Jimmy Savile thing. That's, people are absolutely grossed out by the very sound of his name nowadays. But before that, he was this kooky figure that people kind of weren't really sure about. And I think that kind of explains a little bit of it. But also, it's sort of the thing. This wouldn't hold up in court. But I'm trying to logic this through as if it's an Ace Attorney case that I'm playing through or something, which, is a bit silly sounding, but it's the logical stuff where Ghostcrawler clearly didn't feel he had done anything too guilty. I mean, a lot of these people don't feel like they were too guilty about stuff.
Yeah.
Even in the public eye, because they didn't go back and delete all their tweets about Cosby. There's loads of people who have tweets up, and you're like, obviously, like I say, this wouldn't hold up in court. But if they were terrified and they knew what that meant, you would imagine they would go and do something about it.
Oh, you mean say it's 2014? They all know that they did that as an in-joke with them knowing?
Yeah.
Okay, I understand.
Not even in 2014. Even last week when all this stuff started to come out.
Well, I think if you do that, you see, that's a situation where I actually think the best, I don't want to, saying the best play sounds weird, but I think the best play would be to actually quote tweet your tweet about the Cosby Suite and say, all right, here is it. Let sunlight be the disinfectant. Yeah. Because I think the second that you just like, I mean, there's some people like actually Brian Holinka is one of them. They hook their, the WoW dev, they hook their Twitter account into something that like automatically deletes tweets after a week.
Yeah.
That's something that I guess it's like a sort of a delayed Snapchat thing then. If you do that, like whatever, fine. But if you start targeting, doing targeted tweet deletion from the past, then it's just going to look like you're
hiding stuff.
Yeah,
it's a difficult thing. I'm sort of torn in the middle where I think the cultural angle of it is significantly more important than the individual wrongdoing, because to me this seems like a case of a really funny, like not a really funny joke, an inappropriate joke that they all kind of looked over the real meaning behind it because it was just a funny in-joke among them all. But then the problem is that's the culture at BlizzCon, so that's the problem. So I feel like that should largely the focus of the conversation should be less around the Cosby Suite and more about the overall allegations at Blizzard and the cultural things that let all that stuff actually happen. Because talking about, how many times are people going to like discuss over, did they know about Cosby? And I feel like that detracts from the overall conversation.
It's like the overall conversation is running this in the way that they were running it and creating an environment where the likes of Afrasabi could do that on women.
Yeah.
That's the issue that we're dealing with. Where Afrasabi, we don't actually have Olivia's tweet chain here, I think. But you could probably find her on her profile. But anyway, basically, Afrasabi, got handsy groped. I'm not sure exactly what. But that's a situation where she was a Blizzard employee. This was a situation set up where that sort of thing could happen. That's obviously quite a problem, right? Professionalism, stuff like that. So yeah, in a way, it's like the Cosby bit. It is really the big salacious thing. Yeah. It's the headline grabber. It's the thing that combined with that group chat makes it seem like, very much the worst possible version of events. But what's probably more likely is that it was overall unprofessional behavior that led to essentially a hunting ground for people like Afrasabi. Yeah. And I say Afrasabi because he's the one that we know. Almost certainly other, creeps floating about. I would imagine that list will extend once we get to the stage of this lawsuit where they're naming people. Yeah. So I think that's mainly that covered. I'm not too sure what else there is to say other than, this obviously is all, it is all stuff that sucks.